So welcome to the recap from Spring Mountain's Radical Cup World Finals. It was the inaugural event, and we are here with Makai Stevens and Robert Cipriani, two of our drivers from the event, and also two drivers that are here local to us. We are recapping here from Team Stradale because the event was extremely chaotic for us as teams. Not in a bad way, but all the teams have so much work to do throughout an event like that we didn't always have time for an interview. So we're here today just to kind of recap how things went and discuss the World Finals and discuss the future of Radical Cup World Finals and the other events, and also discuss what we're going to be doing this winter in preparation for the next year. So I'm going to hit it off with these two drivers and let them tell you all how the weekend went for us. So, Makai, why don't we start off with you and discuss the events and how they occurred and unraveled throughout the weekend.
Yes, indeed. I would say that the events in total were, as you mentioned, quite chaotic, but also very rewarding for all members of the team and for myself and Robert, who have the pleasure of sitting with you today, or here today. It was neat to be able to get on course together for the first time. We had spent all year kind of at shoulder's length, enjoying the summer of activities here at the Autobahn, but then having the opportunity to get out on track and go after the top step was really, really neat.
Now, Makai and Robert drive together at Autobahn on a regular basis. Makai is the head of the driving program here. And Robert has two roles. He's a mechanic and driver, and he fills in on the instructor basis as well. So, but this is the first time that you guys have actually competed in the same race together at the same time. Well, we had one at Autobahn here at Oktoberfest, but real official race. How was that for you guys?
Yeah, no, I think we thoroughly enjoyed it. We went in. It was kind of neat because you watch the greats and the stories, and there's always aspirations as to what you look up to in different forms of motorsport, and you see these teams, say in Formula One and IndyCar and etc., having dual drivers on the squad, and everybody pushing towards an end goal, a single end goal, and really in Robert and I's case, and on behalf of Team Stradale, the family atmosphere that is here, if either he or myself took the top step, it was going to be all kosher. And so I would say that it was just a pleasure to be able to finally take all that we've experienced and learned together throughout our time here at Autobahn, be able to put it to the track. And more importantly, too, just see how we stacked up our mindsets towards that of the competition.
Excellent. Robert, this was a big event for you, and you did a lot of preparation coming up to that event. Tell us a little bit about that, because you're a little bit different when it comes to most drivers in the sense that you also work on your car.
Yeah. So coming from a somewhat unfortunate weekend at COTA, we were qualifying there out well, and my engine had a little bit of a failure. So it was kind of worrisome. We had a very quick turnaround time. COTA was, I think, mid-September. And then World Finals was probably a month away. So we knew we had a quick fight on our hands. We had to get that engine rebuilt and ready for World Finals. Francesco gave me a great opportunity to actually go and visit his father's shop where the engine rebuilding happens. And I got incredible insight on what goes on internally. And it was really, really a treat because it feels cool kind of stepping in your car and everything you do, what is happening inside the engine. Pressing the clutch pedal down, the clutch packs go together, engaging first gear, what all the gears are doing and what the pistons are doing. So it was a really cool treat, kind of seeing what the engine does and how it can help me become a better driver.
Excellent. So you actually pulled the engine and brought it over there, and you were part of the rebuild process. And then you were part of putting the engine back together. So you were working down to the last minute before we packed up and the car was ready to go. Internally, mentally, what did that do for you as far as preparing for this event? I mean, it adds a little bit of a different element of stress, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I knew we were going to be able to get it complete in time. The only thing that was kind of worrying me was if we were going to prepare, the rest of the car. Obviously, the engine is quite an important part. But if the engine is in, will I be able to finish the the suspension work, cleaning the entire thing, doing fluids and stuff like that. So it was a little stressful coming into the last minute, but I knew with my great team here, we were able to kick it out and get it done in time.
Excellent. And as a driver, when it comes to engine and powertrain, now you have a little bit of a different mindset when you're driving, in the sense that now you're kind of, you said, before, kind of babying the car or being a little bit more gentle on the car throughout the weekend. So you have a little bit different balance in mind when you're not just thinking of driving. What else are you doing when you're out there on the track?
So obviously seeing all the internals of the engine and kind of how all these parts go together, it definitely gives you a different mindset. Before I maybe thrashed on it a little too much, but now I realize what each input is doing to the engine. I know what sounds are good and bad, and it's a different mindset when you're on the track. So I think it kind of gives me an edge over my competitors. I can relay what's going on to my engineers, and I can also relay to myself, does this sound good? Does this sound bad? So I think it really does help.
Yeah. Excellent. So Makai, you witnessed Robert kind of grow throughout the last couple years, but also this weekend. It was a pretty unique experience from a teaching perspective also, because then you're there in the fight with him during the event and saw how he, grew throughout the weekend. What was that like for you to process being the driver, but also being the coach throughout that time?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, first of all, tremendous testament to Robert, his drive throughout. I would say his commitment to himself, but also commitment to the sport, and then certainly the team that's supporting him. And again, on the backs of it being a family atmosphere, we certainly want to see each other succeed to the best and to our highest potential. So for Robert to have gone through the things that he was doing in light of getting the vehicle sorted just before we pushed it onto the trailer, then getting on the plane with us, everybody boogieing out to Spring Mountain, waking up early, doing the setup, setting up that of the paddock area, calling it a night, waking up, getting after it again. It was really neat, and I would say that it was a tremendous privilege to be alongside Robert in witnessing his growth as an individual, and also as a racing driver. From the instructor standpoint, trying to balance that of ensuring that you can practice what you preach. So there's a little bit of, say, additional pressure behind an outing such as this on this scale of Radical World Finals, right? So we find ourselves at a venue with an opportunity to either fail in front of a lot of people that you encouraged or suggested different ways on how they could drive, or hopefully find a bit of success within ourselves. And thankfully, testament to the team again, we were able to do that and kind of try to spearhead the charge forward in the 1340 class.
And this was a new track. There was many different conditions throughout the weekend. It's a new track to everybody. The weather conditions were not ideal. We had a big field, 35 plus cars. We had 3 different classes of cars. You had the Platinum class, the 1500, and the 1340, which we obviously were in the 1340 class. But navigating all of these different situations on track was a bit of a challenge. How did you get through that? There was a lot of preparation. The event was in Vegas, but we had early nights, believe it or not, because there was a ton of preparation. Speak about that for a second.
Yeah, so coming into a brand new track, obviously, a brand new built track, so there's really not much information out there on the right lines and proper techniques. So we had to do a lot of digging before. Makai did a phenomenal job of going through hours of YouTube videos and just researching the track, trying to make a track guide. Obviously, it's a little tough going into it with no prior knowledge, but I think Makai did a really good job on creating a format on which our drivers could succeed on.
Excellent. And then there was the weather. It's the desert, but we have, some level of heat and then cold. Every morning started off pretty chilly, which for the tires, that's not ideal. and then wins. How did that go throughout the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all got off the plane. It was, we were shell shocked, to say the least, when we got off the plane and saw that it was raining the night before. And so on the backs of what would come, and that is, nearly what felt like hurricane force winds, just kind of screaming across the track there. The rain at the forefront of the weekend put us on our toes, followed by the cold temperatures every morning made for, very spirited outings in the car. Thankfully, the track surface was brand new, and we would come to find that the surface communicated quite well to the driver, as what the tire was doing when it was losing grip, when it had enough grip, or when it was losing grip. There's a little bit of an auditory feedback as well that came from it, which was quite unique and something that you typically don't get unless that surface is quite new. So that was very neat, rather confidence inspiring. But then, right as, just like any I would say path to success, hopefully, we would get thrown a curveball, and the curveball being these gale force winds that would completely change the balance of the car. And so there were some corners where, when we get into the aero dependency of the vehicle, that of, say, the 4th, 5th, and 6th gear corners, we would find that there were some turns that we had to lift prior to, but now that we had a headwind, we didn't have to. So adapting on the fly, and using your competitors almost as like pawns on a chessboard to see what it is they were doing, if we could benefit from it, and etc. And then yeah, you would get a nice little surprise when you'd go opposite of the wind, and it would, I'd say, casually or seemingly push you off the course unknowingly. So
cars throughout the weekend were off the track quite a bit. The surface at the exterior of the track was made up of gravel and rocks. No real grass. Walls were pretty far away, but you guys had to navigate, and there was quite a few close calls throughout the weekend. And Robert, you had a couple of really good moves. So did Mackay. One was unfortunate at the very end in the final race. Tell us about that one. That was not your favorite moment of the weekend, but it's part of a weekend, and we have to discuss that as drivers, because people have to understand that even though you go into the weekend just wanting to win, you have to be prepared for anything.
Of course, and we were a bit on the back foot starting at the last race. I believe I started P5 with a few of the quicker competitors in front of me. I knew it was going to be a tough race, a longer race. The world final race was 40 minutes instead of 35 in the prior ones. It started off as a pretty chaotic first few laps. Obviously, everyone trying to funnel through some very tight corners. But once the field kind of spread out, it was a little bit of a lonely race for me. About five laps left, the double wave yellows came out. We were under safety car conditions for a little bit. And then on the restart, I was behind Mackay and another one of our competitors from Canada. I knew I had a good shot at possibly a podium. This would be the one that really counted. We got a good jump on our competitor, and we were funneling through turn 2, which is a kind of high-speed right-hander. Unfortunately, I got tagged on the rear and got spun around and ended up in the gravel trap. My upright got bent, so my steering was just completely gone. It was unfortunate at the time. We were really close to getting that podium, but obviously crashing and damaging stuff is always going to be a part of racing. It was just unfortunate that it had to happen at the most important race, and where we were really close to that 3rd place.
That's incredibly frustrating as a driver, especially when you're in a gravel trap and steering is locked and you can't do anything, because I'm sure you were trying really hard to get out of that situation and get back on track. In the meantime, Mackay is driving around, and he comes around the next lap and sees his teammate there, and I mean that's got to be that feeling must be terrible as a teammate, because you want your whole team to do really well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think throughout the breadth of the weekend, we were very privy to how each other were performing, and again, we're enjoying the aspect, the privilege that is of being on course together. And certainly, you have these visions again of how the two silver arrows crossing the line together or doing a formation lap in gesture to the great gift and the hard work that the teams put in. And Robert and myself, we understood we had that privilege and wanted to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. And so going into just as the restart came, did radio back to the crew chief and said, what's Robert's position? Sitting right behind you, I looked and had the biggest grin on my face. And yeah, to Robert's point, it was a bit unfortunate, but we certainly credit him for going for the move. And he never makes actions with a lack of consideration for others. And quite frankly, he received a tag on the rear, so it's not a product of his own doing, but just a slight misfortune, wrong place, wrong time. But yeah, absolutely, it was very, very neat to know that on the final lap we had an opportunity to both stand on the podium.
We talked a little bit about Robert understanding the mechanics of the car and being cognizant of what the car's health is and what it can and cannot do. Throughout the weekend, Mackay, you mentioned multiple times, we said, over the radio, how are things going, and you were pushing, but then there came a time where you seemed to hold back a little bit. Tell us about that, because there was a reason for that, a very good reason, but not everybody on the outside of the racing world understands this, that it's not just about going as fast as you possibly can. Sometimes there's conservation of energy that happens, and why does that happen?
So to touch on the relationship between the user and the machine, it's every situation, every scenario, every race weekend, but every race in particular as well, both elements have to pace themselves. There needs to be a cadence throughout the breadth of the weekend. So from the driver's standpoint, it's a mental and a physical fatigue. From the vehicle standpoint, you might have some bushings, uprights, or maybe a gearbox slippage, something that is starting to deteriorate, that is, over the weekend. And so for ourselves, we were starting to come across a few points of concern when it came to the vehicle. And so that meant that some of the brake zones, the threshold brake zones, that is, into the hairpin corners, utilizing the lower gears, we needed to do it with a bit of mindfulness of making sure that we could not only get ourselves out of that corner through the duration of the race and on to the next one.
Mackay is being very polite as usual. What he means by mindfulness is he couldn't downshift, okay? So you came over the radio and you said the downshifts are feeling clunky. And as a driver, that's direct feedback to the engineers and the mechanics. So during the race, you couldn't do anything about it. But then after the race, we found...
Yeah, we certainly found the issue, and that was... again, a testament to the team. Everybody does what they can with the time that they have and the resources at our disposal. And so, yeah, to your point, it was a bit concerning. One time we had competitors closely on our 6 o'clock and went into a false neutral. And so it's, the lap times are looking all great and nice and pretty, and then all of a sudden there's a drop in consistency. And so that's, it sends I would say a surge of nerves kind of go through the body, but then you do what you can to keep the eyes on the horizon and press forward.
So while you were going through the events of the race, you came on the radio and you said that the gear shifts weren't happening as they normally do. And now as a driver, you have to conserve in many different ways. And one of them is through the throttle, the gas pedal. Most people think that the drivers just, hit the gas 100% all the time. But now you got to go down to like 90% or 80%. How do you make that determination as a driver? You came on the radio and you told Austin, your crew chief, that, you're in conservation mode now. And then you had to explain that to him, and, you guys came up with a decision together.
Yes, indeed. And so while you're driving at, say, 10 tenths, the pace in which is optimum for lap time, and to try and build that gap between yourself and your competitors, you're partly at the forefront of it. You're doing it to have buffers for the unknown. So now you come across this unexpected affair where the downshifts are becoming clunky and rather a lack of precision to them. So there's a cadence to every corner and a rhythm, the muscle memory that we all speak to, whether it be found in exercise, golf, or driving a racing car. That cadence or that rhythm needs to then be adjusted in a way So you look to yourself, and you make just a mental calculation, and this is where the experience really plays a factor, and what separates those who, at the earlier phases of their career to those that are towards the middle and or the end, and that is simply having come across enough problems in their time behind the wheel to where they're able to resolve them, or at least have an idea as to the approach they're going to take. So in our scenario, having had the pleasure and the privilege to experience as the test driver for Team Stradale here from time to time, experience similar this similar issue at the Autobahn, brought ourselves to light when going into one of the threshold brake zones, having to back off, as you mentioned, roughly reducing throttle percentage about 20 to 30%. In order to just alleviate some of the tension that was transpiring within the rear of the car.
Excellent. And it's a testament to good driving. It's a testament to understanding the car, like Robert, you are learning now. Tell us a little bit about your last couple years here as a Autobahn member and as a student, and now transitioning to driver, transitioning to mechanical. Give us a little insight to the young drivers out there that might be in karting that want to understand a better path into racing.
Yeah, so I guess it would all probably start back in 2018. I always had a passion for cars just in general. It wasn't until 4 years ago was when I watched my first F1 race, the Monaco Grand Prix.
That's a good one to start with.
Yeah, so I watched that, and I just pretty much fell in love with it ever since. I started following the races after. I ended up going to COTA that year and watched it in person, and that's kind of really when this new mentality set in that, this is kind of cool. I wonder, how do these drivers get to this point? So I did my research. I found out that it all starts in karting. I did more research and found a teen league at K1 Speed. I started doing that in the start of 2019. I knew it was a good foundation, but I knew it really wasn't going to be like the pro level. So I found Autobahn. They did a members karting league in a bit of a more serious go-kart. I purchased my very own that summer, I believe 2020. So 2020 we started karting here, did that for a season, did that once again in 2021 while getting my SCCA pro license here. So it was neat to kind of apply what I learned with Mackay, not only in driving a Radical, but also in my karting career. I also knew at the same time I kind of wanted to move up a step, and we did a lot of sitting down, a lot of research, and I think that Radical was my next step. So on New Year's Eve of 2021, we got my own Radical, and yeah, we had an excellent season this year. Winning at Road America was definitely a highlight. Coming into it, being my first car race in general, I had very low expectations for myself. I knew that it was going to be a really big hurdle to handle, but taking in what I learned, getting my racing license, and what Mackay was able to teach me that weekend, we did pretty good, I would say. COTA was on track to be another good race. Unfortunate what happened to my engine, but obviously we had a great opportunity to get a fresh one for probably the more important race that weekend, the World Finals. And yeah, we had a pretty decent World Finals race. I'm excited to do events in Florida, and who knows what will happen in 2023.
Excellent. And you have a very supportive mother. Okay. We think of racing as a single individual sport, but it's not. It is definitely a team sport. That's why we named the company Team Stradale. It's not the name of our team. It's just part of what we wanted people to understand about it. What's unique about our educational program in Team Stradale is that the approach is not just about teaching you how to drive. It's more teaching you how to get into motorsport and get the most out of it. And so with Robert last year, we had multiple interviews as to the effect of how your motorsport career is going to look. And Mom was a big part of that, and she still is. And so we have phone calls, we have conversations with Robert first, but then there's always a follow-up phone call and, to get the approval from Mom. but she's a big part of your racing career. And you made a decision at the beginning of this year to follow a different path. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So obviously, I graduated high school this year, and coming into, I would say, coming into my junior year, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Obviously, I had this passion for cars and working on them, but I was never really a kind of like just sit down and get taught kind of kid. I liked working with my hands, and I liked working, with tools and just stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to pursue a career in working on stuff. It probably wasn't until around the time of purchasing the Radical is where I realized that, working for Team Stradale is kind of what I see myself doing. If I were to go to school, I'd pretty much be doing the same thing, working on cars, mechanical engineering, stuff like that. It was tough to convince my mom. Obviously, not going to college and pursuing a race car career is definitely not the most ideal thing. But it was tough to convincing her. I hope that I've done a pretty good job now with my results on track to prove myself. It's definitely different, but I think this is what I truly want to do in life, and I'd rather be working on what I'm passionate about instead of sitting in a classroom and just listening all day. So
the results on the track are definitely part of it, but there's also the results in the shop, and you are definitely putting forth the effort. So in conversations with your mom, we discussed what is your day-to-day going to look like. And she's been ultra supportive. All things aside with, the normal typical path a student takes from high school into university or colleges or, any type of post-secondary school. We talked about this, you are in your bachelor's degree right now. So this is your secondary school. And the great thing about it is it's hands-on, and it's also part of your passion. So I commend you for that, and I also thank your mom, because this is a team sport, and not only does it take mechanics and engineers and hospitality staff and all the different assistants that along the way to make this happen, it takes family, and it takes a good support system, and you have that. So congratulations on that. And moving forward, what do you see for the very near future now? You have Florida is coming up, but then we've got a real big season at Team Stradale here.
of course, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this winter, obviously learning more about my car and the more mechanic side. I think, getting more in depth and more involved with fixing stuff, it'll make me a better driver coming next year. And obviously Florida, much better than driving snowmobiles here. So Florida will be really nice. I'm excited to get an insight of the tracks there, kind of see the famous tracks like Daytona, Homestead, Sebring. I think it'll be really neat to go there, and getting involved with new manufacturers next year. We have a few new faces coming to Team Stradale. Going to try my hardest to get involved with them and kind of see where that takes me.
Excellent. What would you say to a young aspiring driver on the karting track, because you both work with these kids as well? What would you say to them if they were to ask you, how do I get into racing, or how do I become the next Formula One driver? I mean, you have a little bit more insight now, and you have some wisdom. What would you, how would you guide them?
I would say, obviously, having a big support group is extremely important. I will admit, coming into karting, I was a little bit of a, what's the word? What do you call it when you're like
naive or green? Yeah.
Self-centered, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I thought, I'm going to teach myself how to be fast. I'm going to, I don't need anybody helping me out. Obviously, that didn't work. I knew my results did change after doing the school with Team Stradale. So that kind of switched my mindset very quickly. So I think, trusting the ability of other people is a really important thing. You can't rely on yourself to teach you everything. You need some wisdom, some experience. So I think having a really strong support system and a really good outlet to go to is very important.
Excellent. How many drivers at that young age, 13, 14, 15, how many of them do you think could become the next Formula One driver?
I think anybody has the ability to. I truly believe that becoming great at something involves you being dedicated to that craft. Um, I personally don't think talent is real. I believe that everyone has a strong skill set that they've worked towards. I don't think you're naturally born with something. I don't think people have superhuman powers to be able to drive a race car fast. I think it's a result of, you know, that dedication and that hard work to become good at something is really what makes a difference.
Excellent. Would you agree on that one?
Yes, indeed.
We talk about that in our school all the time because there are certain people that can learn to put the car on the racetrack wherever it needs to be, and using muscle memory. And obviously, it's an athletic sport, but it doesn't start off as an athletic sport in the sense that to sit in a race car, to drive the car, you might think that anybody can pretty much do it. But then to push the car to the absolute limit and be able to do it lap after lap, repetitive and consistent, and all of these words that we use to describe a good race car driver. We're not drag racing. We're not doing ovals. We're doing road courses. So it's a very specific type of craft. And this discipline itself is not the best of the best, and it's not, you know, they all have their unique abilities and their unique senses about them. But this particular type of car and this particular type of track lends itself really well to drivers that can understand the car, understand the track, and adapt. And you always use the word pivot. And that's because, you know, of the type of racing that we're doing. You guys are a great example of that. Both of you young. Robert, how old are you now? 18. And Makai? 30. Man, I remember when you were 18. So we've all grown, and I'm getting up there. That means so. But we all learn from each other. Something that is very interesting about our school is, you know, these youngsters come in and they start driving. I've been driving since I was 8 years old. You would think that I would be very, you know, self-centered, and there was probably a time I was. But it would be silly for me to think I can't gain something from both of you or any of the other instructors that we have at Team Stradale. And that is probably the biggest learning moment for me is every day that I sit with you guys and I hear you talk about racing and I hear you talk to others about it and how they can gain something from it. And then I get these little snippets and they're little audio clips in my brain, and I hear you guys talk, and I'm like, man, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. So I appreciate it and thank both of you for being a part of my personal journey and my learning as well. As far as World Finals, this was an inaugural event, and it was kind of I don't want to call it a test event, but it was something that Radical Cup had been looking forward to. It is the first time that they're doing it in the United States, and first time they're doing it at Spring Mountain. There was a lot of firsts this year. What types of things are you going to come back with now and be prepared for next year? We'll start with you, Makai.
So going into a second opportunity on the backs of, from the manufacturer's standpoint, from the circuit standpoint, from the team standpoint, and even from the competitors as well. I think the name is the first part. You have to, the title that is the first thing you have to overcome and allow for the emotions and the nerves to find their resting place so that everybody can come and perform at their absolute best. And not only best, but in the safest way possible. I mean, we certainly love the whole spirit of driving a racing car around the circuit is to test what is possible. Kind of the definition of motorsport is finding new horizons, right? And in light of that, safety always needs to be at the forefront of it, because that is what keeps us all returning to our loved ones, to our family support systems, to our teams, and so forth. Going into, if we have, you know, so the privilege to return for a second round, we would certainly look to prepare ourselves. It's about the style of competition. And in Radical Cup, on both state sides and rather globally as well, you know, there's a certain there's a certain personality to the type of racecraft that this SR3 platform and SR10 platform offer, and you have to kind of drive to the strengths and weaknesses of the vehicle. And so in consideration of how the vehicles interact with themselves on course when a car loses grip versus gaining grip in proximity to your competitors, the different types of corners that are kind of back-to-back also really impacts or influences how the racecraft transpires. I would say that, when going into next time, we're going to sweep wing angles, practice at high downforce settings, low downforce settings, and etc. to make sure that we're willing and able to have this car move around underneath us, but also place it where we need to with confidence.
You should have made me prepared for that. I was about to bleep some of that out so any of our competitors out there watching this wouldn't hear all of our strategies. Just kidding. We have a lot of work ahead of us. It's the work that goes into races on the back end or behind the scenes in the shop. There's a lot more of that's involved in. I wish we could have a behind the scenes video. Maybe that's a good idea for a future video in preparation for the races, because that is probably 90% of what goes on. And then the 10% is you guys just driving on track. I make it sound easy. It's not, but it's really funny how much preparation goes into the weekend and how short the weekend ends up being. Doesn't feel that way when you're doing it, but afterwards we're like, oh my God, the weekend's over. We're already on a plane heading back home. So I'd like to thank all of the people that were involved with the World Finals. There was a lot more people that were not with us that stayed back home. We have some excellent gear. You guys look, tremendous in your HRX suits. These are suits from a company called HRX in Italy that designs and manufactures these awesome driving suits. And we've got a representative from HRX. Her name is Isla, and she has been an excellent resource for all of the Radical Cup competitors. What's great about it is from beginning to end, from the design all the way through the construction and the logos and all of that, she helps us out and gets us what we need. And you guys looked absolutely fantastic on the podium. That's what we were looking for. So a big thank you to Isla and HRX. They were a big part in outfitting most of the drivers in the Radical Cup paddock. So a big thank you to you. Huge thank you also to Blue Marble, one of the main competitors in the series, Indy Al Miller, and he has the company Blue Marble that is our hospitality sponsor and a big, big sponsor for the Radical Cup series. And without you, we couldn't have had the delicious meals and the Blue Marble flowing at the end of the night when we could partake. It's a big testament to a competitor of ours, but also somebody that really cares about the series. Obviously, Motul and Hankook for providing tires and oil for the series. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to pull this off. The tires is one of those consumables that a lot of people don't think about, but we go through a ton of. So without the big support from Hankook, especially with all of the issues in the last 2 years of supply chain, Hankook was one of the only manufacturers out there that could supply enough tires to our series and other series out there. I'm not going to name names, but most of the other tire manufacturers did have issues this year, and Hankook did not. So huge thank you to you guys for making this year a successful one. Any last words from you guys before I sign off here?
Yeah, I would say that certainly as motorsport brings themselves to a close in the year of 2022, hopefully everybody had a very safe and prosperous year. Certainly, pull your bootstraps up and let's get ready to rock in 2023. If you see us, in and around the Florida region, please stop by, say hello, and certainly engage with us, as we'd love to have the opportunity to engage with you. As Robert was kind in sharing, we'll find ourselves at Homestead, Daytona, and Sebring throughout the off-season here in the Chicagoland area. And then as well, if you're interested in schools, the Robert is a testament to the opportunity that might lie on the horizon for yourself, and we'd love to have the privilege to work with you.
Team Stradale is now opening a location in Miami and Tampa. So we have Radical Miami that is now officially open, and we are headed that way. So we have a transporter right outside here that is loading up cars from customers from the Midwest. And we're heading towards Florida to get out of this winter weather, and we'll be driving there. You'll be able to see both Makai and Robert and some of our other mechanics, instructors out in Florida this winter, basically from the weekend after Thanksgiving all the way through March. We'll be back and forth, and so we hope to see all of you out there, and we're going to enjoy the warm weather from this point forward. Thank you, both of you, for this time, and we got a lot of work to do in preparation.